Hi, everyone. I'm Molly. I'll be moderating today's webinar. So today we're going to be talking about maintenance benchmarking. So benchmarking data is a very common, common practice in a lot of other industries, but we're kind of just starting to understand its significance in property management and specifically property maintenance. So today we're just going to kind of be talking about how you can use benchmarks to set a standard in your process and specifically identify areas that you could improve. So we're going to be, talking about how you can start benchmarking and also some key metrics to keep an eye on. We have Madison joining us today, who's going to talk about some of the, the trends that we're seeing as far as like best in class and world class data. But I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. So today we're joined by Idan Avatal, and he is the managing partner at Highpoint Real Estate. So Idan, if you want to just talk a little bit about your knowledge and kind of what you're up to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Molly. I appreciate you taking the time. Hello, everybody. Idan Avatal, Highpoint Real Estate. We're a Los Angeles-based property management company. We manage about 1,500 or so units throughout the greater Los Angeles area. Mixed bag of properties from, Class A new construction buildings to your classic, 50s and 60s vintage construction. Some that's in kind of gone through the renovation process is in better condition. It's had some TLC, and others that are still kind of going through that process and are a little bit more of a rough around the edges, as we like to call them. But a mixed bag of properties. As a company, we are very departmentalized, and we have a formal maintenance department. We do not do in-house maintenance, which is kind of uncommon, I'd say, for a lot of competitors in our immediate market. But the way my business partner and I have always seen that is it's a bit of a conflict of interest for us as a management company that focuses on portfolio management for investment firms and family offices and private investors that own larger portfolios. Our whole thought process is it's our duty to watch their bottom line as best as we can, and to always make sure that we are just performing at peak performance. And we understand that there are constraints that come along by doing that in-house. And so we've always just been able to negotiate prefixed pricing sheets and terms with a number of different vendors within every trade. And rather than do the in-house maintenance, kind of work them against each other and keep our vendors just competitive. All while having kind of an in-house touch on that by having in-house maintenance coordinators and an in-house maintenance manager. I'd say prior to Property Meld, we were doing it probably the way most people were doing it at some point, which is our maintenance coordinators were fielding our incoming AppFolio work orders. They would have to field a work order, identify what they're working with. Maybe they had some knowledge in troubleshooting. Maybe they didn't even think about troubleshooting, right? And then the first thing they do is just think about which vendor are we going to send out. And then they would essentially become the middleman between tenant and vendor. Hey, Molly, are you available Tuesday at 2:00 for the plumber? No, Tuesday doesn't work. How about Wednesday? Hey, plumber, how about Wednesday? No, I can't do Wednesday. Can they do Thursday? Like, our team would just spend an insane amount of time just being this middleman with like a million text messages and a million emails. Incredibly frustrating for the tenant, I'm sure, incredibly frustrating for our team. But I'd say more importantly, and for the business owners and the business managers on this webinar that are listening, I'd say more importantly is from a business perspective, all Avi and I, my business partner, kept hearing is people saying, we're busy, we're busy, we're busy. And so the only thing that you can think of is like hire, hire, hire. And you realize that people are just busy with a lot of inefficiencies. They're not busy because they can't handle the workload. It's not that we have so many work orders or that we, don't have enough vendors. It's just that when you're getting stuck doing the wrong thing and you're just inefficient, everyone feels busy and overwhelmed. And so we were spending a ton of money just hiring more maintenance coordinators, just to kind of keep the ship afloat. And I think that we just learned that with scale, systems break. I think at a time when we managed like 200 or 300 units, having like a maintenance coordinator worked. When we had, 500 or 600 units, same thing, you made it work with 2 maintenance coordinators, but there's a point in every system that with scales, things just start to kind of break and it's time to reconsider and recalibrate. And I think Property Meld for us was like that aha moment, that light bulb of there is a better way. Where the hell have you guys been this whole time? Where have we been this whole time? And bringing that on has really been a game changer for our maintenance department as a whole.
I love that. That's such a great point. And I think we'll kind of get into that as we start talking about some of the benchmarks that you can be watching. Like you mentioned, are you actually busy because of the amount of work that's coming in, or are you busy because, yeah, like you mentioned, you're not building efficient processes? So I love that you brought that up. So our other panelist is Madison Zimmerman. She is our head of marketing at Property Meld. So Madison, I'll let you talk a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of like, why would the head of marketing at Property Meld be someone to speak on benchmarking? But in my 3 years at Property Meld, the benchmarking data and the data in general that we have had has really driven a lot of the conversations that we have. And one of our big jobs in the marketing team is to get this information out to the masses and like let you guys understand what trends we're seeing, what we know is going on and helping. And so super excited to bring what I can to this conversation. Also, bear with me, my first time as a panelist and not a moderator, and excited to see some familiar names out there. Hey, Stacy, nice to see your name on here. So yeah, I'm ready to dive into it. Super intimate group. So please like be a part of it with us, a part of the conversation. Utilize the chat and the questions, and we'll do our best to answer those and share your own insights on some of the questions too. I love that.
Yeah. Like Madison said, we have a smaller group today, so we appreciate you all joining us. We know that the property management world can get a little hectic, especially after a long weekend away. So we appreciate you guys taking the time, and we'll jump into it. So our first question: why do you think benchmarking maintenance data is so crucial to success in property management?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say it's the most important question. And I really think that you can zoom out and say that it's really the most important question kind of company wide. Avi and I have always had this philosophy here at Highpoint that you can't grow what you can't measure. You need to be able to measure against something, right? When somebody says, I'm busy, or when somebody says, this is, we're overwhelmed, or this system isn't working, you almost need to ask yourself, like, compared to what, right? What like you're busy compared to the other maintenance coordinator, or this is difficult doing it this way compared to some other system. Like, you need to have some kind of a measurement, some kind of a measuring tool to say, okay, here's where we need to be, here's what people are experiencing, or here's how it's going. And so here's the margin for error, or the room for opportunity, right, for us to kind of fill that gap or get better or become more efficient or whatever it is. I think that kind of taking it back to the way we used to do things here at Highpoint is we didn't have any data to go off of. It was emotional. It was, I'm busy. And it could have been they're busy because they're genuinely busy because they don't have enough vendors on board. It could be that they're busy because the holiday weekend work order flow was crazy and they were out for 4 days, and now they're coming back on Monday, and it's just an in the moment feeling. It could be a number of different things, and it's very emotional driven. And I'd say as a business owner, making big decisions like hiring more staff, or maybe slowing down growth by saying, okay, well, we got all these properties in the pipe. Let's not bring those new onboardings in because our team is busy. Making an emotional decision like that is just not smart. We've been having a missing puzzle piece, in our opinion, in the maintenance department, of just not being able to really benchmark what is our team actually experiencing? Where do we compare to maybe some other companies? How do our maintenance coordinators compare to each other, right? Is one better than the other? It helps with things like promotions. It helps with things like training. Like, hey, Stacy, you're doing a really, really good job, and you're managing 500 units. We've got, Annalie here that's doing 300 units. How are you able to do the extra 200 units? What is it that you're doing, or what system are you using, right, that's allowing you to do that? Same thing with our vendors. The ability to actually have some kind of a, especially because we outsource our maintenance, having some kind of a general idea of how our vendors are doing. Are they responding to melds quickly? Are they responding to tenants quickly? Are they scheduling quickly? And how fast are they going out there to actually make repairs? All these data points are crucial to run a successful maintenance department or a maintenance division. And I think that prior to Property Meld, I think if you're using like a classic PMS, like an AppFolio or whatever it is, you're just not getting that. You're getting like a giant number of, you've got 37 new work orders, and you don't really have data as to like, how are those work orders going? Unless you're kind of creating your own external system, which, you know, is difficult to do. So I think having maintenance data and benchmarking really anything, but specifically for this conversation, you know, maintenance data is an absolute crucial piece to the success of a company, to the success of just the overall relationship with the client and making sure that you're taking care of their asset, and to the success for tenant retention and things, to make sure that maintenance is being done in the most efficient, kind of, smoothest, fastest possible way to leave a lasting experience and impression with the tenant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that if you zoom it out beyond just your own individual benchmarking metrics and take it regionally or even nationwide, that is the biggest value there that I see. Is it's giving you a realistic expectations, and it's protecting you with your investors and your clients, and allowing you to say, you know, if you're going in the dark and you're shooting for a 1 day speed of repair, and that's not in the regional average of your competitors in that same market who are using similar vendors, having similar maintenance requests is 3, then you're kind of setting your team up for failure, because it's not a realistic goal to shoot for. So at this point, you can set a realistic goal, you can share data with your investors and be able to come back and say, hey, regionally, this is where we're at. We're at a 2.3 day speed of repair. We are crushing it in this industry. And that's like that huge protection. And then it gives your team a realistic goal to go for, and then feel those wins and keep trying to do better and better and better. Where if they're just always seeing this number that they don't really believe in, or there's no data to back it, it's like, how are we supposed to get here? This kind of creates that game plan.
Yeah, and I think you just brought up a really interesting piece, which is, you know, prior to Property Meld, our maintenance team didn't have a whole lot to celebrate about. Meaning, it was just like another day at the office where they'd come in and they'd have to get through their work orders and get it all scheduled and kind of get through the day. I literally hear the team now chatting about things like, you know, resident satisfaction scores that they're getting, and wow, I can't believe we're at a 1.7 day speed of repair. Like, we're killing it, right? And they're literally like celebrating these metrics all of a sudden, where it almost has given them a deeper purpose and a deeper meaning to like the work that they're doing. And it's almost kind of created a little bit of like a competition around maintaining those stats. Yeah. And literally on Monday after the holiday, our, you know, days of repair obviously went up because we'd been out for 4 days and we weren't scheduling anything during the holiday time. And they came in, and this week it's kind of been the conversation about like, we're at 3.3, we're usually at 1.7. Like we gotta get, you know, caught up. And so it's literally given our team just a little, I'd say like a deeper purpose and a deeper meaning to like what they do on the day-to-day, which used to just be like, damn, we got 30 work orders. Like, all right, you know, let's get through it. And now it's
amplifying it in a way.
Right.
Everybody's down for a good game. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think also it gives you the opportunity to build programs in there, like bonus structure programs. And even, you know, we've been in this post-COVID, you know, shift in the trades era right now that is kind of putting, it's, you know, you talk about a buyer's market. Well, this is definitely a vendor's market right now. And if you can start having some metrics that are going to create bonus programs for your vendors who are high performers, and you actually have the data to back it, or even be able to say, you know, hey, you need to step up your game or else I'm going to go and I have another vendor that I can go to, but I really love working with you. What can we do to, you know, up this output? And sure. So those are like, just, it opens up a whole realm of opportunity of different things that you can do to increase your overall business performance.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, it drives back to the same point, which is without the data, without factual data, you're really just having a bunch of conversations around people's thoughts and feelings and emotions, which are all relevant and important. Obviously, like, when our team, even if our meld stats are healthy, and someone's feeling overwhelmed or whatever it is, I mean, that's still our job to see kind of what's going on and make those changes and provide them with the tools and the resources that they need in order to be successful in their job. So it doesn't mean that this becomes the new kind of Bible, and whatever the team's feeling, you just ignore it as long as your meld stats are healthy. But it certainly helps, right? It gives you some roadmap to know where you are, where you're going, and just how we're doing overall. And it also opens your eyes to a lot of things that you may thought maybe were going well, and now you're realizing maybe are not, or realizing things that just you didn't pay attention to. Like, I mean, I know that last year we had a lot of rain in LA, which is very unusual. We don't really get a whole lot of rain, and so I'd say most owners neglect their roofs out here for many years. And so last year we got a lot of rain. There was a lot of roofing issues and leaks, et cetera. And at that time, we felt like we couldn't catch up. We didn't have enough roofers, but we didn't really know how many, like, are the roofers that we did have, are they being responsive? Are they actually scheduling? It was very difficult to kind of get our hands on everything just because we didn't have a system in place. Today with Meld, like, we have the ability to quickly identify what vendors are we missing, essentially. Like, are we short on any vendors? Like, based on the work order volume, based on the meld volume that we're getting, and based on the speed of repair, and based on how many melds are going to that one, the same vendors over and over again, it almost helps us identify, like, you know what, we're using the same 2 plumbers over and over again, and we're realizing the speed of repair on plumbing is actually starting to go up because they're clearly overwhelmed. Maybe this is the time to go out and get another plumber. And we didn't have data like that before.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent opportunity too, in that same mindset of tracking these trends and starting to look at things more in a preventative aspect. One of the things we hear a lot is it's difficult to get investors, your clients, bought into preventative programs. But if you can bring this data to them and say, hey, we see this trend every year. The rainy season comes. If we can do roofing work in advance, and now you can track your cost of maintenance spend. That's another one. Like, it's costing us this much per, request to fix these ad hoc. What if we go in a lower season when the rates are better, come in, like, you can start selling more of your product, your service to not only your investors, but to everyone. And also protect yourself again and saying, these rates are not that far off. Like, we're actually, lower or just slightly higher, but we're providing a better quality of work. Like, it all goes back to protection.
Absolutely.
There were so many great points in there. I'm super excited to keep going. And like we mentioned, if anyone in the audience has any questions or comments, we'd love to hear. But moving on, so I mean, we talked about why benchmarking is so crucial for success, and you guys mentioned a lot of, how just the wide impact that it does have. So why do you think that there's so many property management companies that aren't comparing their data to their competitors, or maybe not even tracking data at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that property management is going through kind of a revolutionary boom right now. I think that property management as an industry has always kind of been looked at as this old man's game, being done in a really old school fashion. I literally over the years have met clients that have owned tens and thousands of units, and they were still operating those units on things like pen and paper in some cases, and others just like Excel and QuickBooks. Yeah, and it makes you realize just how far we've already come as an industry. But with things like the property management softwares of the world, like Appfolios and Yardies and many others, and now things like Property Meld. I think something that I'm realizing in this space specifically is that it's changing quickly with software, but it's also changing quickly with the people who are actually within the industry. It's starting to not be such an old man game, and it's becoming younger in a lot of ways, where being collaborative on data and being collaborative on systems and being collaborative on how people are doing things is becoming, I'd say, more open and more of an open book. I know that when I got into this business about 12 or 13 years ago, the only thing people would share is how many units they're managing, right? It was like, that's the only thing you brag about. Is, we've got 3,000 units,
Yeah.
we've got 3,000 units. And it's like, wow, who does your accounting? It's like, I don't know, like that's my secret sauce, but we've got 3,000 units. I'm realizing more and more now, especially with the many different integrations that are happening with softwares, and the many different softwares that are coming out to just streamline the industry and make the day-to-day more efficient. It's almost opened this new community of property managers who are realizing there's a better way, and people are collaborating. They're collaborating on what softwares they're using. They're collaborating on what systems they put in place. They're collaborating on what oversees a company they're using to hire, oversee staff. And I think that they're also starting to collaborate on data and benchmarking, data, because it also allows you to say, oh, you manage 2,000 units? Oh my God, so do I. I mean, let's talk about this for a minute. How is your maintenance team structured? Oh, it's structured this way. Amazing. What's your speed of repair? Oh, wow, you guys are managing to do it in a day and a half. Like we're at 3 days. How are you doing that? How are you structuring your team to do that? Or, oh, you're doing in-house maintenance? Got it. We're doing, outsource. So, that makes sense, right? And I think that it's just becoming a lot more collaborative in that way. I just feel like the industry really has started to change, over the years with the property management softwares that have come out, which were kind of like the game changer, revolutionary piece. I remember when I started in the business, I was taught for the company I worked for prior to just brag about how we had at the time Appfolio. It was like, just tell them that we're using technology. Like we can collect rent online. Right? Like, we are using technology. And that was kind of the thing. You look today and companies like Property Meld are really changing the game. Department by department. I think that's something that we're realizing is that property management softwares are really good as a general platform, but they're not going to be good, or they're not going to be amazing at every part of the process. They're primarily going to be good for accounting, and they're primarily going to be good as a kind of like a data storage center for all of your information. But they're not going to be good at all the other pieces of the puzzle, from leasing to maintenance to everything in between. I think that with all these new companies coming on board, and I think that with the industry just changing as a whole, it's becoming a lot more collaborative, and people are going to be more open to sharing the data. I also don't think a lot of people had data before, and so nobody's sharing data because like they didn't have data, right?
I started 3.5 years ago, and I'd ask, "What's your speed of your median speed of repair?" I'm like, what?
Right.
Like how fast is a work order? I'd say
almost anybody in this business is guilty of that at some point, and probably is still guilty of that in some areas of their company. I mean, I think that you really have to have a really good system in place to be able to measure everything happening within your company. So I think that a big piece to why people aren't sharing data at one point was because they didn't have any data to share, right? So all you could share is the one piece of data that you knew, which is how many units you manage, how many employees you had.
Yeah.
That was the conversation.
Yeah. And I think that and even knowing what to track, like what is it?
Sure.
When the evolution of that too, and, Property Meld, when I started, it was like, your speed of repair, and this is what it is. This is what you need to be tracking. It needs to stay, below, we know with HVAC, it needs to stay way before 5 days, because at that point you're going to start like dipping, and we could see those things. But now we're even taking it, even like peeling the onion back, and it's like, let's look at it in the cycles within your speed of repair. How long is it taking you to from submission to assign? How long is it taking you from assign to schedule? And then your completion. So you can even go in and like break it down even farther and understand, actually fix things, and it becomes actionable. Like data is great, but actionable data is what's really going to change the game. And then being able to trust the data. I would be interested to know from our attendees, how many of you are tracking or following any sort of benchmarking metrics, and and if you're not, why are you not? Is it just the access to the data? Is it the time, the time to get that too? Because when you think about your days, if you have to manually track that data, and then to trust whether it's clean or not, that's got to be another
there's a massive
point
error there. I mean, I think that if you're trying to track data outside of a system like this and you're putting together your own Excel sheets or whatever it is, the margin for error is huge. Yeah, I think that you can't rely on data like that. That's not being properly extracted and properly, populated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have been sitting on a massive amount of benchmarking data, just data in general, since I've started here and since the start of the company. And now it's finally breaking it down and really getting it out there and seeing what these things are that you need to be watching. So Jack says they're not tracking any benchmarks. AppFolio is hard to pull data from, attempting to export to Tableau, but very inefficient. Yeah, I think it's coming back. It's like, first of all, like software enters the scene and it's how you do, it's the execution, it's the working through of the day-to-day tasks. And now it's really pivoting into being that assassin's weapon that you can really go and leverage for the data. And hopefully, I mean, Property Meld's just getting into the space. We'll start seeing more and more different softwares being able to provide that. I know Buildium has metrics in their accounting that I've seen have been really great. So I think it's exciting to see. I feel like it's going to be game on when benchmarking data is just like readily available, like the softwares are. And it'll be interesting. What I want to watch is kind of like where it started with like the first players in the game bringing the benchmarking data to the table and what those benchmarks were and how it starts to transition once that becomes more readily available. And if people are like, I have to be in that best of my region or my local market or whatever. It's back to the gamification.
I think what the industry has always lacked is there's no standard, meaning pre-melds of the world and the ability to properly track data and benchmarking just stats across the board. There's no standard. Everyone is just kind of doing what works best for them, and they are essentially benchmarking themselves against themselves, right? They're just saying, here's how we're doing. Wow, 5 days to turn around a work order. Like, that's great. Like, great job, Madison. 5 days. We're really proud of you. And like, that could be good for that company, but could you be doing it are your competitors doing it in 3, right? Or are your competitors doing it in 2? And there was no standard before. And I think that's something that Meld is doing. And I'm sure that as the other kind of competitors join the space, and I know that many are. I know that like AppFolio now is trying to kind of put out their own piece. And I think you just mentioned Buildium has their own, et cetera. And I know that there are many others out there. I think that what's going to happen is eventually we're going to have some kind of a standardized metric to go off of. And so anybody in this space is kind of going to know that number cold. And it's like, you're just going to know that like there are these specific standardized benchmarks for maintenance within the industry. And that's going to be the goal, right? That is how you're going to measure yourself against the standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think going off of Madison, kind of what you mentioned about, I think part of the reason people might not be tracking these benchmarks is because they don't know what to track. And, looking at some of our attendees mentioning that they're not tracking data at this time. And Don, I know you mentioned like, obviously what you're going to pay attention to, those metrics really depends on what you're trying to move and what you're trying to improve. But just kind of from a baseline level, if someone, wanted to start kind of benchmarking some of these metrics or paying attention to them, what are some of like the most important or key metrics that you really think are like a good jumping off point if this is something that you're newer to?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I think first and foremost is our speed of repair. I think that for us, that's a big one. our goal has always been to have all work orders kind of completed within a 48-hour period. I think prior to Meld, that almost seemed like we were pushing the envelope a bit. Now that we have Meld, we're for the most part achieving that, and having the ability to actually track that has been huge. But I think speed of repair is a really, really big one. I think that our resident satisfaction score is really important, because that is, I'd say the residents don't sugarcoat. They're either happy or they're not. Vendors will sugarcoat and they'll give you the runaround about the story about how they went to the Home Depot and they didn't have the parts and the whole thing and why it took longer or whatever it is. Your team from time to time will kind of try to feed you the story. But the residents are like really kind of black and white. They're not going to kind of go down the hole too much. It's either like, this was done great, 5 stars, thanks. Or we tend to find that it's like 1 star or 2 stars. Like the guy showed up late, they didn't fix it, they left my house a mess, whatever it is. We don't see a whole lot of like 3 or 4 where it's like, it was good, but it wasn't great. And like, they're like giving you like all the details. Like it's really kind of like, it tends to be pretty black and white. And so that's been really helpful for us to be either be like, we're doing a great job or there's a problem. And internally we've created a system around anytime we're getting, anything below 5 stars, but really kind of focusing on like the 1 and 2 stars, that's a flag to our maintenance manager to call that resident and say, what happened? Because that is where you're going to be able to identify the problems, whether that be a problem with the vendors showing up late or not showing up at all. And that's something that you got to address, or whether it be that one of our maintenance coordinators sent out somebody to make the repair, but they didn't send out the right person. And so the tenant was expecting something to be fixed, and now we sent out the wrong vendor. And that's maybe an internal training piece where it's, hey, let's talk about which vendors we should be sending for which types of problems. You sent out a handyman for something that another electrician should have gone out for, right? And now we've kind of lost another day, and the vendors or the tenant's upset. So I'd say that's another big piece, just our resident satisfaction score, and making sure that we're keeping residents happy, and that ties into retention and the many other kind of pieces.
And I think something to know, if you don't mind me jumping in, but with resident satisfaction, like how you track that is so important because, for example, we had a customer started using Property Meld, and about at the year mark, I was looking at their resident satisfaction score within Property Meld, and they were at a 4.7 because they were doing the follow-up. They had it down to a science. Like they had automation doing the follow-up for them. But then I went and looked at their Google ranking, and they were a 2.4. And I was like, what? How? And so kind of dug in a little deeper, and they didn't have that second tier of the automation setup that was like, after they got those great ones from internally in Meld, they weren't kicking them messaging to go to Google. So if you're only tracking your social media, you need to kind of look at a percentage of, I would even say like a 10% margin of error there, because you're likely to only capture those ones that are like super angry, and you might be missing some of those others unless you're encouraging people to go there and do that. So I think making sure that you have follow-up processes in place, and then make sure that you are watching it in a controlled space, because if they were to just look at their Google rating, that would be catastrophic for them. Now we need to solve for that and get that up, but there's a huge delta between what the reality of their resident satisfaction was and that. And then I think being able to compare your resident satisfaction to your speed of repair and see the correlations there is going to be another really great place to start as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point. And so kind of going off of that, and Idan, this is more of a question for you, I guess. So you mentioned kind of like we've talked about that these metrics really help you make data-driven decisions instead of those like emotional assumptions about your process. Did you have kind of any like aha moments or epiphanies when you actually started tracking this data that you were like, whoa, like I did not expect that, either in a good way or a bad way, but that like something that really was illuminated for you?
Yeah, yeah. There were a few things. I'd say number one is we had the aha moment that in hindsight, we were overstaffed. We were overstaffed in that we just kept plugging the problem of everybody being busy with the work order volume with just more maintenance coordinators. And what we should have been focusing on and what we should have stopped and asked ourselves as a company is not, okay, they're busy. What do we do? Oh, we need to just bring in a maintenance coordinator. We should have said, what are they busy with? And we would have very quickly realized that what they were primarily busy with was being the middleman on the coordination. And that should have naturally led us to the next question of, well, how do you solve that without more people, right? Because that's the easy one, is just bring in more people. But we kind of, by doing that, you might be solving the problem of busy, but you're not solving the problem that our maintenance coordinators were just getting annihilated with 9 million text messages a day. And like, that's not a fun job, right? A mix between upset residents because they're dealing with whatever maintenance issue that they're dealing with, and they're just feeling some type of way about it, coupled with a million text messages flying back and forth, and being this like middleman where you don't really control the tenant and you don't really control the vendor, and you're just trying to kind of be the middleman pushing information back and forth. It's an incredibly frustrating position to be in, and it doesn't make for an easy or an enjoyable day at work. And so our initial solution was always just like, okay, well, if they're busy, just bring in another maintenance coordinator, bring in another maintenance coordinator. But what we really should have done is stopped and said, is there a better way? And Madison just mentioned automations and things, and Property Mail's automation ability has been game changer because it's removed our, like, from the moment a meld comes in, we don't really touch it. I mean, it comes in, the tenant already gets some kind of a confirmation, so they're getting acknowledged immediately that we're on it and kind of what the next steps are and what they should expect. And then our main coordinator is just looking at it, deciding what vendor they want to assign it to. And the moment it gets assigned to a vendor, which literally takes 30 seconds, like, it's done. The tenant's getting updates along the way, like, this and this vendor has been scheduled, or assigned. They're talking schedule, it gets scheduled, they're getting reminders, they're in confirmations, the vendor goes out, the vendor does what they do. And then as soon as the vendor marks that meld complete, your system is sending out a text to the vendors, to the tenant, saying, our vendor just notified us that they completed the work order. Was it done to your satisfaction? Right. And so we're also doing like a audit control touch, and it's all being done automatically, right? Without that human touch. And so a big aha moment was we realized we were just doing it wrong. I mean, we were just doing the whole coordination piece wrong. It was a very manual, outdated way of doing things, and we just neglected that. And our solution was always bring in more people. And so I think that was a big piece. Another big piece, though, was that I think that we enabled our vendors, in that a lot of our vendors are commercial grade vendors that have a whole staff and a whole team, and they're big, and some of them are even nationwide, and so they're easy to work with. But there's a lot of these like mom and pop vendors that are maybe 3 or 4 or 5 handymen that are great, and they do really good work, and they're licensed and they're insured and they've got all the qualifications, but it's not a formal kind of operation. So after they are out on the field doing their own work orders, doing the work orders, they have to come out and do their own accounting and do their own scheduling and all these other things. And so we started to almost, because we found vendors that were great and we didn't want to lose them, but we understood that they were time constrained because they were kind of a one-man band. We almost started to enable them by saying things like, hey, we can help you coordinate, like, just give me your schedule and we'll kind of plug in your schedule and then tell you where to be at what day and time. So now we're essentially like, Highpoint is now offering like free scheduling services on behalf of our vendors, right? Or for our accounting team, there was a lot of issues because our accounting team wasn't getting invoices quickly because these smaller vendors just didn't have time to do their accounting, right? And so work order invoices sometimes would come in 60 days after the work order was complete. And then you have to have the conversation with the owner about like, yeah, no. I know we paid it in March, but that was a bill from January. Sorry, just the vendor finally got it to us, whatever it is. So Meld has solved all these things, right? Now we've given our vendors a tool to submit an invoice like right there on the spot, track their invoices, which is huge. Have a scheduling virtual assistant, essentially. Like, we're not doing your scheduling for you anymore, but here's a virtual assistant that will help you with your scheduling. You just got to populate your times, or just click one button that the tenant suggested, and the system will take it from there. And so there was a lot of aha moments. I mean, it's literally changed the way we do maintenance. It's changed our teams day to day. It's changed our vendors day to day. I'm confident that our vendors, our tenants, our owners, and our team internally is just getting a much better service and having a much better kind of day to day across the board.
Mm-hmm. I have a follow-up to that because I think staffing is just a big issue in the industry right now. And, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups where people are like, how many maintenance coordinators do you have for 100 units or for 200
Sure.
units? And it's hard you can't really nail a number down, right? It's not a hard and fast rule. So you kind of mentioned that was something that was illuminated for you guys. Kind of what metrics specifically made you realize like, whoa, this is not a staffing problem. This is an efficiency problem.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to the bottom line, right? There comes a point where you're hiring, and you're going, we don't make enough money on this client, or we don't make enough money on this portfolio to just like bring in a bunch of maintenance coordinators. Like, it just doesn't, the math isn't mathing, as they say, right?
Yeah.
It just stops making sense. And you hit a wall where you say, something's got to give. There are two options here. Option one, we need to let our quality of service go. We need to accept that, we're managing 1,500 units. We can't hire more than 3 maintenance coordinators, and because it just doesn't make any financial sense to do so. So the option one is to say, okay, so then the answer is, hey, let's change the policy. Maintenance shouldn't be done in 48 hours. Let's change it to 5 days. And let's remove the quality control text message that we used to send out when the maintenance is complete. And let's just hope that everything is done okay. And let's just get the work orders when we get the invoices when we get the invoices. And I know that that'll create a bottleneck for accounting from time to time, but it is what it is, right? And you just have to kind of just accept that you're going to let your quality of service go. That's one option. Option number two is you need to just beg the question. There's got to be a better way. And we literally stumbled across Mel by quickly answering the first question, which is, we're not willing to sacrifice the quality of service. So that's out. So there's got to be a better way. And we started to scour, the internet to see what else is out there. And we kind of demoed multiple different companies before we found Meld and realized the power of Meld. But I mean, staffing in this business is extremely difficult. But this business is also difficult in that it's for the most part, it is a low margin business. It's volume based, but it's a low margin per client business, or per property business, should I say, for the most part, compared to many other businesses. And so finding the perfect balance between staffing, because at the end of the day, I don't yet buy into that technology and software is going to completely take over the workforce, although many are a firm believer in that, and I can understand where that philosophy is coming from, but I don't think that we're there yet. So I think that staffing is 110% necessary. You cannot beat a human touch. You cannot beat somebody jumping into, a fire drill scenario. Like, it's just, there are so many parts of the process where the human touch is absolutely necessary, and it's just unreplaceable with any technology or any software. But there are so many parts of the process, like scheduling as a perfect piece, where you don't need I don't know what salaries are in other parts of the country, but you don't need a $70,000 or $75,000 a year maintenance coordinator to be the middleman sending off a bunch of text messages going Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, 2 p.m., 1 p.m., 12 p.m. Like, that is an expensive coordinator, right? An expensive person just sending off a million text messages. When you realize that you can solve that with something like Property Meld, and then say, okay, let's have less coordinators now just overseeing what's happening and making sure that on the one-off scenarios where the tenant's being difficult, or the vendor dropped the ball, or we had an issue, or we're dealing with an emergency, or whatever it is, we're going to insert you into those moments, because these are high-touch moments where, having that human touch is important. And there's value in having somebody in that role. Whereas 95% of the work orders where it's like, my toilet doesn't work. Does Tuesday work? Does Wednesday work? Does Thursday work? Like, you don't need somebody at that price point coordinating that.
I actually am going to launch a poll really quick. We have kind of just like a downloadable one pager that includes some of our world-class benchmarks that Madison was just going over. So if you're interested in receiving that, go ahead and vote in that poll. And we'll shoot that over to you after the webinar. I also threw in a link in the chat, like Madison mentioned, if you're interested in seeing a live demo with our team. you can visit that link there to do that. So I'll leave that poll up for a couple seconds so everyone can vote in that. And then I do just have one more housekeeping item before we jump off today. So we will not be having a Beyond Maintenance in December. We obviously just know with the holidays, things get really crazy. And we don't want to take up time, but we do have a really, really exciting new thing coming in December that's going to kind of replace our webinar for that month. So we will actually be teaming up with Buildium, who is one of our integration partners, for a live webinar. We're going to be discussing maintenance's impact on 2024 industry trends. So in anticipation of 2024, Property Meld and Buildium are joining forces to discuss some of their industry findings, and specifically how maintenance can address some of the challenges that are facing property managers in 2024. So I don't know if you guys have read the 2024 Buildium industry report, but it's an awesome read, and that's kind of what sparked this idea. And so if you haven't had a chance, definitely check that out. And I will throw the registration link in the chat. That'll be on December 13th. We're going to have Robin Young, who is the manager of market research for RealPage, Ray Hespin, our CEO and co-founder at Property Meld, and then Tim Wenner, who is the COO of Dodson Properties, excuse me there. So that'll be a really awesome webinar. We're super excited to partner up with them. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out for all of you so that you can be the first to get registered. So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll.
Thanks, everybody. Thank
yes.
you. I could have talked about this all day. So this was fun. I like being on this side.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you to both of our panelists and everyone for joining in, and have a great rest of your week and enjoy the weekend.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.